We're now going to focus on the reproductive system. It is important that you do need to be mature as we talk about the primary and secondary sex organs and sex glands, as these were created by God for a specific purpose and function. We're going to go through and focus on some different terms, addressing the definitions and descriptions, and then we're going to show some illustrations to help you understand and remember these. We're going to first address the male reproductive system. The male gonads are called the testes. These are two glands that produce sperm. We're going to be talking about the sperm as the male sex cells that are produced through the process of spermatogenesis. The testes also produce hormones, specifically testosterone, that aid in the development of the sex glands and organs. As a male baby starts to develop during the last 2 months of fetal development, the testes will descend through a canal into the scrotum, which the scrotum is a pouch of skin, located below the pelvic region, keeping the testes cooler than the rest of the body. The sperm cells mature in the epididymitis, which is a compact coiled tube attached to the outer edge of the testes. There is also a tube called the vas deferens, which carries sperm from the testes to the ejaculatory duct. Now, a vasectomy is when the vas deferens from each testicle is cut and tied to prevent sperm from traveling out of the testes. Now, vas refers to a duct or a canal or a tube or a vessel. Now, the ejaculatory duct propels the movement of sperm and fluids, which the sperm and fluids is called semen. So it's a mixture of different fluids that also contain the sperm into the urethra. Now remember, the urethra is the tube that drains from the urinary bladder. So we've already learned that we have the two ureters from the kidneys. That goes to the urinary bladder, and then you have the urethra. So not only does the male pee through the urethra, but also it can serve as a canal for transporting semen. Only one can come out at a time. It's either urine or semen, but never both. Here we can see the epididymis, the seminiferous tubules, and then the vas deferens. Now, as we talked about the semen, the seminal fluids, there are going to be 3 glands that are going to help produce and secrete the seminal fluids. You have the seminal vesicles, and fluids from the seminal vesicles contain fructose, which is a carbohydrate, which is a sugar, which is a source of energy for the sperm cell as it travels, and prostaglandins. Prostaglandins are chemical signals that trigger the rhythmic contraction of smooth muscle. This is mainly found in the female, but this is also found in the male, which is believed to be secreted to help move the sperm along. Then you have the prostate gland. You may have heard when someone is older, they have issues with urinating because of the size of the prostate gland, perhaps squeezing the urethra or the pee tube. The prostate gland secretes an alkaline buffer. Alkaline is the opposite of acidic, so it's more basic, and this protects the sperm cells against the acidic environment of the vagina. And then you have the Cowper's gland, and this secretes mucus-rich fluids before the semen is secreted out. This will also protect the sperm cells from the acidic environments found in the urethra. Here we have the breakdown of the organs that you're going to need to know for the male reproductive system. You can use this page as a practice to quiz yourself, as we're going to focus on this picture, which is more of an anterior view rather than a lateral view. I will give you some worksheets that will show you both. Here are the answers. Now, spermatogenesis is the development of the sperm. This is going to be inside each of the testes. Now, inside each of the testes, we have seminiferous tubules, which are the site of spermatogenesis, or formation of the sperm cells. Think of genesis as the creation of. They are lined with sperm-producing cells called spermatogonium. Now, the spermatogonia are cells, as you can see in the picture. And during this process, these cells divide to form spermatocytes, specific sperm cells. These spermatocytes then differentiate and change and divide into spermatids, which are immature sperm cells. Sertoli cells nourish the developing sperm cells, or spermatids, until they mature. They provide a barrier between the blood and the seminiferous tubules. The Sertoli cells also control an entry and exit of hormones, nutrients, and other chemicals into the seminiferous tubules, which protect the developing sperm cells. Here's the process of spermatogenesis. We're going to differentiate that from mitosis, and we're going to move into the process of meiosis 1 and meiosis 2. Now remember, meiosis is the formation of the gametes. So this is what we're going to address as meiosis. We have a division from a 2N cell, and we're going to divide it into the gametes, which are 1N or haploid. This means it only contains 23 chromosomes. So a sperm cell will only contain 23 chromosomes. That's very important because you get 23 chromosomes from mom, 23 chromosomes from dad to form the zygote, which is 46 chromosomes. So meiosis 1 and meiosis 2 is vital to then create the haploid, or 1N, 23 chromosome sperm in the male and 23 1N ovum in the female. Now the sperm does determine the sex of the offspring. The female egg is always going to be an X chromosome. The sperm, the genetic information within the nucleus, is going to contain either an X or a Y, so that will determine the sex of the child. It is built for locomotion, having the flagella or tail-like structure to cause it to move back and forth. Now, there is a small amount of cytoplasm around the nucleus. This is very important because the cytoplasm means a limited energy reserve, so it will die after a few days. The oval head contains the acrosome, which is an enzymatic region. This acrosome allows it to break down the outer coating of the egg. And within the head, you have the nucleus containing the genetic material. Now, the middle body behind the head is going to contain a sheath of mitochondria, providing some energy, as well as microtubules. This then leads out through the tail, or the flagella. Now let's focus on the female reproductive system. The ovaries are a flattened oval-shaped organ. You can see them in the picture. They form in the abdominal region, and then they drop and descend into the pelvic region. The ovaries are connected to the uterus by two fallopian tubes. Fallopian tubes are also called oviducts. At the end of each fallopian tube, you have finger-like projections called fimbriae. The uterus or womb is the largest organ in the female reproductive system. This is where the embryo and fetus develop. Now, the lining of the uterus, as you can see, you have the uterus or womb in the picture, and then you have a layer on the inside. That is called the endometrium. In some of your diagrams, you're not going to have that labeled here, but make sure you know the endometrium is the tissue layer that will provide nutrients for the embryo to grow, as well if there's no fertilization, it will be shedded out. So the uterus is not broken down, just the lining wall called the endometrium. The uterus is connected to the outer environment by the vagina. The vagina also serves as the birth canal. The vagina is an acidic, hostile environment to kill different microbes, such as bacteria that might enter the female reproductive system. The acidic environment can also destroy sperm, but as we said, that the male reproductive system tries to counteract that. Then we have the cervix, which is actually the muscular ring between the vagina and the uterus. So you can see the diagram here. And here we have the answers. The only thing that's not listed here is the endometrium, and then that's the thin lining on the inside of the uterus wall. Here's a side or lateral view, and as you can see, you have the urinary bladder, the urethra, you have the vaginal opening, and then you have the rectum, which you're going to have basically the colon and excretory waste. So as you can see, it's very different from the male reproductive system. You don't have the connection between the reproductive system and the urethra that you have with the male. You have one for urination, one for reproduction, and then you have a third opening for excretory waste. And here we have oogenesis, which is the formation of the ovum or the egg cell or oocyte. This occurs in a specialized ovarian cell called follicles. The follicles contain two types, the primary oocyte and then the cells of the granulosa. So with the sperm, you're producing many cells. You're producing many sperm cells, but here you're only going to be producing one specific ovum. The rest are going to be called polar bodies or non-functional that will soon disintegrate and die. Now the oocytes are immature egg cells, while the granulosa is the layer of cells that form the follicle wall. Oogenesis begins when the follicle cells surrounding the primary oocyte begin to divide. As the primary oocyte, remember this is meiosis, cytoplasm and nutrients move to one end of the poles and form the secondary oocyte. This contains 23 chromosomes. The remaining cell is referred to as the first polar body. This receives little cytoplasm and this will then die. After the first division of oogenesis, we have the process called ovulation. This is when the follicle cells surrounding the secondary oocyte proliferate. Proliferate refers to dividing, making many of. This is rapid reproduction or a rapid increase in numbers, and then a fluid-filled cavity forms. The dominant follicle pushes outward, ballooning the outer wall of the ovary. This is then going to burst, secreting the secondary oocyte. This process is called ovulation. So the secretion of the egg cell or the ovum, or specifically secondary oocyte, from the ballooning outer wall of the ovary is called ovulation. The surrounding follicle cell remains within the ovary and is transformed into the corpus luteum. And this looks more like a cauliflower-shaped structure. This secretes hormones essential for pregnancy. Now, if pregnancy doesn't occur, the corpus luteum degenerates after about 10 days. Here you can see a picture focusing on the meiosis of the primary oocyte, and we have meiotic, from meiosis, meiotic division, first meiotic division, and then we have the second meiotic division. And then you can see on the right picture, we're starting at number 1, primary oocyte within the follicle. That this gets larger, it's dividing, it's proliferating. We have the mature follicle within the ovary, and then that's going to burst, releasing the secondary oocyte that was within the follicle. So the secondary oocyte is now going to move down the fallopian tubes or the oviducts, and your follicle that was ruptured, that burst, is going to stay within the ovary, and it's going to develop into the corpus luteum. So you can actually see that. It looks kind of yellow there. And then, if no pregnancy happens, it's going to degenerate. Here's a little comic. When I looked at that, I'm like, I don't know, is that appropriate? But it is a good visual to help you remember the process of what's happening. We'll then focus on, in more detail, what menstruation is in just a little bit. But this shows you the process and the swelling of the follicle as it then releases the oocyte. The luteinizing hormone is going to cause the secretion of this. And as we talked about before, the follicle stimulating hormones, follicle isn't really talking about hair, but referring to the development of the egg or the sperm. We're not done yet. So we have the first division, meiotic division of oogenesis. Then we have ovulation. Now we're going to move into the secondary division of oogenesis. And upon its release from ovulation, from the ovary, it's now moving through the fallopian tubes or oviducts by the fimbriae. And we said the little fingers. It's going to move along the fallopian tube by cilia. Now, if there are sperm present, it's going to become fertilized. Now, if there are no sperm there, it's just going to degenerate and break down. And we'll talk about that in a second. But then the secondary oocyte is going to undergo another unequal division of cytoplasm and nutrients to develop it into the finalized fertilized ovum. Now that's if it's fertilized, if sperm enters it. The cell that retains most of the cytoplasm and nutrients become the ovum, while the other ones that are not developed, that does not retain the cytoplasm, becomes the polar bodies, and these degenerate. If the secondary oocyte is not fertilized, it will degenerate within 24 hours and die. Now, when this occurs, that is menstruation or the menstrual cycle. Here we have the breakdown of the oogonium to form the ovum through the process of oogenesis. And then you have the polar bodies, which are not developed. And again, you can see them identified as 1N or haploid containing only 23 chromosomes. Here we have a comparison between spermatogenesis and oogenesis. You can look at this. And then we have a visual comparison between the two. Oogenesis on the left, spermatogenesis on the right. And then here are the 4 phases of menstruation: the flow phase, the follicular phase, ovulation phase, and we already broke that down and talked about that, but you can read through this. Here's another visual, less cartoony, and you can see the days of the menstrual cycle as we see what's happening here. Now in the next lecture video, we're going to focus on fertilization and development and birth.